So let me just hit start here. We'll get going. We'll definitely have time for questions, which is great. We'll kind of find some spots. We'll definitely talk about kind of what's been brought up in chat. So what we're going to be doing today is kind of for the first part, I'm going to be talking about mainly our Autocene enterprise application platform and how it relates to our e-procurement. Okay. So just to kind of start off the conversation, I'm going to run us through is kind of grounding us in context of where I'm going within Autocene, just so we understand what's going on, and in relation to that, we'll start introducing how we can start doing e-procurement with that. So currently on my screen, you can see the login screen here. So this is the login screen to the Autocene Enterprise Application Platform, which is one of 3 tenants of Autocene, okay? So we have this portion of Autocene. We have our integration engine, which is Autocene Passport, which we may be talking about today. And then lastly, we have Autocene Atlas, which is our contextual language processing, artificial intelligence. So we probably won't be talking about that today, but of course, if there's any questions about that, you can definitely shoot that into chat. Now, on the login screen, so number one, Autocene is completely web-based. And what that means is that we can really start to face Autocene in a number of different ways to different groups of people, like business units, departments, individuals, inside your organization, and also outside your organization, so external parties. Things can be like vendors or the public or different customers or clients that you may have. Now, because it's web-based, this also means that we can have it on a number of different devices. That means you don't have to install it or have an app to install to give it to different people. You don't have to manage it that way. You simply go to your browser, you access it from your Autocene environment, and then you can begin to play around in that environment. Now, there's a ton of different ways that I could talk about logging into Autocene. So just a quick couple high-level ideas. Number one, if you're a smaller organization, you can host your entire user base within Autocene. You don't have to rely on things like Active Directory or an HRIS system to do that. However, if you're a larger organization, what we can begin doing is interacting with those other systems to provide things like single sign-on. So using your organization's credentials to log into Autocene and your environment. Now, whether or not you're logging in through single sign-on or kind of a traditional method where you're entering your account and your password, you're going to be going into the Autocene home landing page. Okay, so the home landing page is really kind of a high-level view of what's happening within your Autocene account. Okay. So number one, Autocene's a role-based system. That means that you can begin to stick users into different roles and different positions to reflect what they're going to be doing in Autocene. So if we're talking about e-procurement, there may be different groups or individuals that need to sign off on things, need to approve, or need to interact with certain components of that procurement process. So they will have access to those specific components. Now for the home page here, you can see I have a bunch of different widgets that are displaying relevant information to me. All these different widgets are completely configurable. So when we see the logos, the colors, the different types of widgets themselves, those can all be configured to how you want it to be represented in your Autocene environment. Okay, so just a couple of things. Completed applications or canceled applications, how many applications I have available, activity status, actions required. So in procurement, it could be, I require you to sign off or add this information. My favorites list, my most used applications, these are all up front for me so that I can begin interacting with those right away. So if I'm regularly in the shopping cart request procurement stage here, I may want to start that application right away. Now, on the left here, just some quick tabs that we're going to talk about. Okay, so we're on the home screen currently. The My Applications page, this is everything that has to do basically with this platform. This is the crux of this platform, is the apps that you are developing or were developing, that this is the place where your user is going to be going to. They're going to be picking this up. They're going to be interacting with those applications. Like I said before, the role in which that person is sitting, or the type of activities that they're doing in your organization, is going to represent what they have access to in terms of applications. So if I'm regularly a part of, say, human resource actions, I may be doing stuff like onboarding or inviting or applicant tracking or something along those lines. That would show me those types of applications that I have access to, that I can interact with, and only those apps. This kind of configurability is across all the applications that you have within Autocene. So if your procurement process has things, again, that those single groups only need to look at or only need to interact with, that's going to be represented here. So our Actions tab, as we're procuring something, there may be certain actions or additional information or data that we need to input, or we need a person to sign off on. Actions are going to let your users know what they need to do. It's going to provide a full queue of different things that they may need to take action on. So you can see here I have a couple of different applications requiring my attention. We have some procurement, we have payment requests. I may be a part of the data center security team, so I may need to fill out some assessments, or I may be a part of onboarding new vendors. All the applications in this environment that need me to interact with these different components, they're going to present those, and I'm going to be able to go in and interact with that. So if it's a part of a procurement process, maybe there's a shopping cart request, I can go in, I can take action. It's going to display all the relevant information of that application. I may have a single line item. I may have a very complex configuration for servers, or whatever you're looking to procure represented to me. I have the ability to then begin taking action. So most commonly, approve, request changes, deny. These types of actions, they're all configurable to what you're doing with your procurement process. So it could be add this component to the configuration, or it could be as simple as what we have here. So application status. So Autocene as a platform, all the data, it's moving, people are touching it. How do we keep track of that? So each individual user has the ability to look at their application statuses, okay? So if I begin to launch something in terms of data center security, I can keep track of that and watch that as it moves throughout the process. If we go to our very simple procurement process down here, I can go in, see the details of who's sending what. So I can see that I've started this application. It may have gone to a certain individual. I can drill down even further and see the representation of that information. So I can see at a high level glance what's going on, who's done what, and what type of information is happening at that point. Of course, this is as complex as the application is. So if it's a very heavy procurement processes, there may be different components that are represented at different levels that you're going to be looking at. So drafting. Drafting is very important within Autocene for long form types of processes. So these are things that you may have a very extensive procurement process that you may work on, want to put down for a while, or may gather additional documentation or data that you need to interact with. Well, you can save an Autocene application at any point, save that screen into your drafts bucket, and then you can come back and edit that draft and continue on with your work. So you can come back, you can begin interacting with the metadata that you've represented there or input, and continue on with your process. This allows you the flexibility to kind of just put it down and save multiple versions if you need to. And kind of the last thing that we're going to touch on is the Delegations tab here across our whole board here. Delegations allows the user to set the actions that their account is incurring during a certain time frame. So if I need to go on vacation, say from today, maybe till next week, I can begin to go through my Autocene categories or applications and set a deputy to take charge of my specific actions, okay? So if we take on your entire organization's structure, maybe that's represented in PeopleSoft or Workday or your Active Directory, we can then find out who the supervisors are. We can allow that user to select that supervisor and allow them to give those actions over to that account while they're away. So I can enable that right away. I can move that around. Now, what we can also do is we can have each individual application have their own rules of delegations and notifications. So you're not always going to have your colleague remember to set these types of components. And in procurement, there may be urgent requirements around that procurement process that need to move through specific channels. Well, within your single Autocene application, what you can begin to do is configure certain business rules to allow that delegation, allow those notifications to take place without human interaction for setting those. So at a high level glance, that's kind of contextually what we're looking at for the landscape of what Autocene is. So let's get down to the crux of what this portion of Autocene does, and that is the applications themselves here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring over a couple of different applications that allow us to show what types of different procurements that you can make relevant, okay? So we're back on our applications page here. So applications page, we can begin to navigate to our different applications that we want to engage with. So let's say that we want to start a very simple procurement process, something like some very simple goods or services that we want to take on. This is probably the most simple type of procurement that you can design within Autocene. It's this idea that we want a user to come in, we want to pre-fill some information. So there may be information stored in other systems that we want to bring in to the user interface. We then begin to guide the user through making their decisions. Okay, so I'm a part of this department. I'm making a materials request. I may be making a service request. As we go through that process, we can present different parts of the user interface to that person to allow the application itself to move information or act in certain ways. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly fill this out. Let's say that we're going to do a spot buy. We're going to say it's not stored on site. We're going to explain why it's not stored on site. We're going to put some notes. We already have a delivery address because Autocene knows my account. So we can find where my account is in relation to maybe a certain facility that they're at or a certain business group. And then we can start going into the actual procurement or items that we're looking to procure itself. So there may be a certain item that I want to search out. So we have a search bar underneath here, and it may be something as simple as gloves. So we look at gloves, we select maybe some medium gloves, and it populates that line. And of course, you can add additional lines and go through that. At the end here, we have our supervisor information. It's going to go to Tracy Sparks, and she is going to take on this procurement request. Okay, so very simple. We're procuring a set of gloves in this case. This type of application, you can have a small group of people build within an hour or so within Autocene to begin to make their days a little bit easier to manage. Now, as I hit that submit button and as it goes from point A to point B, the person on the receiving end is going to receive an email for action, okay? So kind of going back to our actions queue over here, it's going to be added to the queue of the account receiving that action, and they're going to see the entire request up front within an email format. Okay. I can easily click here to take action, and I can go directly to that actions page and begin interacting with the actions that are required for that certain type of procurement. Now, that's as simple as we get. Like I said, this idea that we're taking on a very simple item. Well, let's get a little more complex here with the applications. Let's get into intake and configurations, and let's get into maybe some critical deficiencies, which we need to procure extra stock or procure extra items to fulfill certain requests. Now, when we are procuring something that has a lot of different elements to it, you may find yourself in different kind of hardships in controlling that information in that intake process. For this application, what we've done is we've actually centralized all the different data components that we need to take into consideration for procurement into a single application, where this process used to be 14 different subsets of Microsoft Excel sheets, homegrown solutions, and even kind of leveraging of a larger BPM system to make certain procurement happen. So we have a central interface that people can go into. They can begin to fill out all the relevant information, but for the sake of today, what we're going to do is we're just going to click the information here, and we're going to take in that information. And it looks like I just had Kirk accidentally get kicked off the screen here. But just as I'm waiting for Kirk to rejoin here, I'm just going to take a quick look at the questions here. So Veronica asks, in a delegation, is there a way for a super user to reassign something in an emergency situation? There sure is. So with just kind of taking a step back to that delegation and that, when something is in flight or in movement, we can actually have an application move from one component to another from a super user. Usually this type of person can come in and utilize either an Autocene application that's built specifically for doing that type of request, because there may be different metrics that you need to involve in that reassignment, things like an audit trail or movement, or by default you can leverage the Autocene kind of reassignment action from the super user page itself. So there's a couple of different ways that you can really take that type of delegation and move it in and out, specifically in regards to the information that you're looking to record, or on a base level of Autocene, the platform itself. Now, our intake application, what we're doing here is we're taking in those components that we're looking to create a configuration page to hand off for something to procure. In this case, we're procuring new servers. So those different components may be the project level information, the contacts, the high level questions that I may be filling out, but on different pages here, we may need different departments to interact with things like our server templates. So we may have some base components that we need to attach to this configuration. So this type of server, this type of design, and this type of network. Things like databases and other supporting servers. So as I'm going through these pages, I want you to imagine that these types of different pages are showing us additional information that we need to attach to this procurement sheet. Okay, so right now this application is acting as kind of a general user interface that all groups can come towards and interact with that project. But again, we can go back to the previous application and have it move in a more workflow manner. So there's different ways that you can take your Autocene application and kind of leverage it against the type of user experience that you want to do. In this case, centralizing information, or in the other case, looking for the idea of approvals or additional information being added in a chain of events. Now, a different type of procurement is this idea of procuring different components to continue manufacturing. This critical deficiency request is one of those applications that we have a couple of customers utilizing to fulfill manufacturing runs or fulfill their kind of supply chain. Now, on the outset, you can see here, I can actually come in and create a new deficiency request. It allows me to go and set the type of business logic that may affect the time in which this is moving, or affect the way that this type of request is being handled. So if it's critical, we may have those different time elements affect what is going to happen to that request. So we talked a little bit about delegations and notifications. If it's set to critical, we may want this to be approved through the chain every single hour. And if there's a failure point in somebody not approving that, we can then push it off to a supervisor or keep that moving. As I've kind of talked about these applications, you've seen a lot of different inputs here. So these inputs are relevant to the application, but Autocene as a whole, the things like dropdowns, checkboxes, date pickers, search metrics, so going in and maybe going to a different page or searching out product lists or searching out different components, that is all configurable in your Autocene application to utilize in different ways. Again, it's contextually around the idea of what you're looking to procure or how you're designing your procurement process. So as I kind of go through this, I can look up vendors, I can look up the quantity needed, the impact can be automatically assigned. Our contacts, we can contact our different kind of parties that are responsible for different aspects about this procurement. So there may be a material manager. There may be a general plant manager that I need to assign. We may need to notify higher ups, like the VPs of supply chain. All these different types of components we can begin to auto-populate and allow that person to add and kind of move that information in the way that it needs to go. Okay. Now, the cool thing about this application is that we're doing this manually right now. We're kind of entering in quantities, the impact numbers, contacts, vendors, all that kind of fun stuff that you would normally fill out maybe in a sheet of paper or kind of going through a chain of emails and that. Most of our customers have actually taken this to the next level to where we also have semi-attended automation happening in the background for these applications. So even though I can come in and say that I need to procure these items to continue the manufacturing run, in the background we can actually have Autocene Passport watching those stock levels or watching certain metrics to make an automated request on behalf of different users. So we have different customers who are using Autocene Passport to do that component of automation to adjust those stock levels between different plants and locations to automatically fulfill those procurement requests. Of course, all that information, whether or not it's manually entered like this, or automatically or semi-automatically in the background, making those procurement requests, all that information is going to be stored on the Autocene SQL database, which is the back end for the platform here. So you have a full audit trail of the information moving, who's touching what, and what's happening at any given time. Of course, you can have check balances. Other customers, they have that automation element happening in the background where we're setting our quantities and the impacts and kind of finding the stock across our network. But we also have people who engage those kind of stage gates where you have a person sign off on the automated requests. So a person could see that, hey, Passport on the Autocene side has kicked up a request saying that the stock levels are too low at this manufacturing plant. Do you approve the machine to make that automated purchase order? And you can say yes or no, or you can manually intervene. Now, the last The last application suite that I want to talk about in procurement needs is actually a very cool suite of applications that we've worked with the Designer Selection Board in Massachusetts in designing. So they have a complete network of architecture firms who supply different levels of skills and needs to different projects that all centralize around this kind of network that essentially is almost a very, very complex procurement system in the end kind of thought about it. So on a high level, we actually have a landing page where firms can begin to view the public notices that are put out by the DSB of Massachusetts, okay? So if you can start thinking about a public notice as kind of a request for bid on a certain project that may be happening. So if we go in here, that's maybe we're relocating a main gate for a complex, or we're doing a study for design for general building renovation. These types of things we are looking to procure a firm or a set of firms with contractors, subcontractors to come into the project and bid on that project and then do that project, okay? Now the public notice search, we have this idea that we need to procure these elements. I'm currently logged in as the Autocene guest firm here. Well, what I can do is I can go into the project title here. So maybe we need to bid on this project because we are an architect firm. We can go in. We can see the information relevant to that project. Again, if you're procuring something like a large bit of machinery or stock or even leasing land assets, these types of ideas, the general information is going to be represented, and then we need to build around the set of approvals and additional information and show that flow of information in that procurement process. In this case, we're listing out our project and its sub-needs, and then we're collecting the artifacts and assets through our step-by-step process here. So you can see that I can search out our notice. I can get our general project summary. I can submit our registration and disclosure. So registration and disclosure, for those who are not familiar with this process, it is assigning my firm's information and the disclosure that I've filled out previously. So we have held on to those metrics, that metadata, so that we can automatically pre-populate this information for this type of procurement. And it allows me to automatically go, hey, I confirm these assets down here. I want to continue on. So because your procurement process may have redundant information that is filled out every time, we can actually begin to store that information relevant to who's filling that out and allow for pre-population to come into play. So kind of the hardships of rekeying information or bringing information across from system to system, that is all alleviated when you build a procurement process within Autocene, because we can tap into those assets and begin to bring in the relevant information around your procurement process and automatically pre-fill that information or alleviate the filling of information for that certain party, because they may need to only interact with one certain thing. We don't want them to pre-fill out these types of elements every single time that they need to do something in terms of your procurement process. Of course, that's all leveraged against your business rules and layout that you put into your application. So whether or not you have a mature process or a process that is still being kind of fleshed out, you can begin to design out those certain aspects for automation when you're building the application itself. And we've seen a lot of different customers have a process that's not fully fleshed out become mature in designing it through an application, because they can see the redundancies, they can see the aspects of improvement that they can bring in with automation. The really neat thing about the designer selection board's kind of procurement and public notice system here is that we're actually keeping track of kind of KPI, and we're also keeping track of supplier diversity as well. So in this case, our suppliers, as we're going through the process, you can kind of think of our firms here as our suppliers. There may be certain metrics that you want to record or engage with certain vendors around those certain elements. For the designer selection board here, they're keeping track and kind of elevating different firms that are either like minority-owned businesses, woman-owned businesses, and showcasing that you can begin to elevate those certain suppliers or work with those suppliers strictly by recording that information and leveraging that information. So you can see here, I can actually go into the database search engine here, and I can actually go in and search out diversity metrics if that's important to you. It's these type of indicators that are all relevant to your process that you can bring into Autocene. So if you want to start recording out what suppliers are woman-owned because you want to work with more woman-owned business suppliers, you can bring that in, you can record that information and have maybe different weighting mechanics to elevate those suppliers to the top of the chain or help those different suppliers. It allows you to keep track of all that information because it's important to you. Now, as we're kind of going through the procurement process here, you can see with the actual kind of step-by-step process here, we have a template in which we're filling out information. So contracting, applying different consultants, our application itself, this is all templated so that we can come in and easily fill this out in a consistent manner. So there's an easy way to provide consistency around the information that you're recording. So because our project here requires different disciplines, we can bring that up front for the person bidding on this project. The same is with your supplier. If you have required elements around that supplier, the template can change here in which we are ensuring that we're gathering that information. So I could be a prime firm, we can have sub-consultants, and of course we can begin to search that out. The cool thing about the DSB process here is because it's such a large network now, we give the ability to the supplier, if you think about it, or the firm who's bidding on this project, the ability to look out for all the information that they need to fill this out in a quick and easy manner. So the application kind of provides a consistent template for contracting, so you can have contracts spit out at the end of this, or a configuration when we talk about the Kaiser example over here, in which you have consistent information moving throughout that system. So let's move forward. We're just kind of going through the process. Again, this is a very involved process where we have different elements. You can see that we have different stages here. It's just showcasing in this regard that you have the ability to have a very large process be built within Autocene without having to leverage different kind of COTS, off-the-shelf products, or point solutions, or homegrown solutions to make that happen. You can actually encompass all that within your Autocene application to make that process happen in an easy manner. So after we're done with that data, let's just take a step back here. Let's say that we filled out our procurement. What do we do with that data? Well, we can begin to centralize that data into a location where you can navigate that data. And that's another great example about the designer selection board's entire system here, is that they actually have a central database application. So this is an Autocene application that provides search functionality for the firms and different types of metrics that a person wants to look at. So if I wanted to come in and say go to maybe the Arrow Street firm here, I can look at different reports, I can look at completed applications around that, and I have access to that to bring up and navigate. This in itself, it's all an Autocene application. So you have the power to design basically a search engine within Autocene if you wanted to. It's that kind of flexibility to give you oversight of the information that's relevant to you at that point. I've seen customers, kind of going back to our previous delegation answer or question, is I've seen customers come in and have this type of database search functionality, but they may be the procurement line, procurement projects, or procurement items that you want to keep track of. Well, you can drill down and then you can begin to reassign those actions or reassign different parties to work on it. So this kind of drill down feature, interaction with information, can be relegated to different parties, and you can have, of course, super users or kind of subject matter experts come into play and interact with that. I just want to take a moment here, see if there's any questions kind of popping up in chat here. If you do have a question, don't hesitate to kind of write that out into chat, and we can definitely get into it. I'm just scrolling through here, just making sure we didn't miss anything. So with that, basically that's kind of a general overview of kind of how Autocene applications work. You've seen a lot of different examples kind of play back and forth. We've had things like procurement of actual materials, procurement of project designs, and for the designer selection board, actual procurement of bids. This allows really kind of the flexibility of Autocene to apply against the different kind of procurement that you want to do. And I don't know if Kirk is still on here, but the great thing is, if you do have questions about pricing and that, you can reach out to us directly here. So what I'll do is I'll just pop up our contact information. You can reach out to either myself or Kirk Deininger here via our email, or you can give us a call directly for pricing, and we can work with you on kind of where you fit in the pricing model. We can talk about kind of best use cases and how we can help you get started with Autocene. And for those who are on the webinar today as well, you can definitely also contact us about piloting and kind of beginning to use Autocene as well. We'd love to do pilots with new customers to show them really the power of Autocene in applying it against your certain use case. I can continue to talk forever today about Autocene and how it applies to different aspects, but of course, really the proof is in the pudding. So we kind of want you to indulge, reach out to us, talk about starting a pilot and how we can apply it against your different use cases, and how we can show you how Autocene can help you with those certain use cases. I want to thank everybody today for taking some time out of your day. Hope you all have a great rest of the weekend here. If you do want to reach out, just take a quick snapshot of the screen here. That's our contact information. I know Kirk and myself have posted our emails in the chat there. Don't hesitate to reach out. We'll definitely get in contact with you. We're always open for a quick meeting as well, or a quick talk on the phone. We're no strangers. But in that regard, thank you everybody for kind of viewing this today. And we will see you in a couple of weeks with our next webinar.